It's the day we're coming to you live from Ogun State, Abeokuta specifically, venue of the 4th Ogun State Investors Forum. We've got Pt.1 Adebajo, who is the Commissioner for Agriculture. She joins us in the studios this morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you.
So tell us, what is your ministry's approach to this Investors Forum?
Okay, I run the Ministry of Agriculture on behalf of the 7.2 good million people of Ogun State. And the role of the Ministry of Agriculture is really to improve the livelihoods of farmers and firms, and to ensure that agriculture takes a prominent place in the state. Agriculture is one of the 3 cardinal programs of this administration, and we recognize that there's a huge opportunity in agriculture. In almost every single value chain in Nigeria, there's a huge gap between demand and supply. And so the role of the Ministry of Agriculture is really to ensure that we're able to close that gap and ensure that we have sufficient and nutritious food.
Okay, when you say demand and supply, does that just have to do with the products, the food? Because there are several factors before getting to that stage, isn't it?
Yes, so there are several factors before getting to that stage, but demand and supply means how much are we producing and how much are we actually consuming. And this gap applies to both the food sector and the industrial sector. So, for example, Ogun State is home to the largest number of cassava processing industries in Nigeria, and yet they can't get enough cassava. And so there's a huge opportunity for our farmers. And one of the roles of the Ministry of Agriculture is to understand what are the obstacles, what are the challenges preventing us from being able to produce more, and ensure that we systematically address those challenges through policy interventions, through capacity building, and through ensuring that all of the inputs that the government is required to put in are put in, so that the gap is systematically closed.
In 2017, last year, you did have this similar forum, and tell us, how have you moved from that point in 2017, now in 2018, having the same forum? How much of encouragement has your department been able to instill in the younger generation, people who are, for instance, interested in going into agriculture? What's the figures that you have? Okay,
so agriculture is holistic in its approach. You don't just tackle one area, you tackle, it's a system. And so you tackle everything so that the system can move forward. So we've looked at holistically, as I said earlier on, what are all the challenges preventing us from being able to produce more and preventing our young people from being able to take advantage of this huge opportunity in agriculture. One of the things that we've done is to ensure that in all of our government programs, we reserve at least 30% of the spaces for our youth and women who are underrepresented in agriculture. So the average age of the Nigerian farmer is 55 years old, so it's clear that we need to replenish the workforce. So for example, we've constructed over 1,000 fish ponds, of which 1/3 are going to youth. We've cleared 2,000 hectares of land for cassava, of which 1/3 of those spaces are going to youth. And so in all of our programs, we're ensuring that our youth are systematically introduced into agriculture, and we put them alongside experienced farmers so that they can learn both the theory and the practice. We're also introducing mechanization, because for many of our young people, the old back-breaking image of agriculture is not attractive to them. So with mechanization, with technology, with training, we're finding that more and more of our youth are interested in agriculture. About this time last year, we held a youth program, a youth seminar, and we were surprised at the number of people who expressed, the young people who expressed an interest in agriculture. And so we know that there's a lot of potential, and one of the roles of the Ministry of Agriculture is to ensure that more and more young people go into agriculture.
But it's beyond just going into agriculture. There's the agricultural value chain. Are you also looking in that aspect? Because there are those who would wonder, if we finish farming, whether for fish or for food crops, what about processing? What about the markets?
When we talk about agriculture, we refer to the entire value chain, which really moves from production to processing. But indeed, it's not just that. There's so many services which are associated with that. So these days, you find people even going into media, for example, specifically relating to agriculture. You find young people applying technology in agriculture. There are growing fields of hydroponics, aeroponics, where you can farm on much less land than was traditionally done in the past. And so agriculture is changing, and one of the roles, as I said earlier on, with the introduction of mechanization, introduction of technology, introduction of extension services is to really open all of our eyes, not just the young people,
Talk
to
to
the
us
very
about-
vast field that is called agriculture and agribusiness.
So if we can, let's now look at the figures. You said last year you had a workshop, a seminar for the youth, and the government also set aside 30% of everything, land, funding probably, and equipment towards agriculture. So let's look at how much would you say has come in since that seminar in the area of agriculture?
Well, in terms of youth training specifically, we've trained over 3,000 youth and seeded them into our different programs. But we can see that there have been growing numbers of people interested in agriculture. We're allocating more and more hectares of land to both smallholder farmers and large firms who are interested in going into agriculture. So the nation is responding to the clarion call of His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, which was inspiring for all of us, that we need to grow what we eat and produce what we consume. And so understanding the importance of agriculture to the nation, there's been a huge influx and interest in agriculture, and we're really capitalizing on that because there's a big opportunity really to be taken advantage of.
So in terms of like, one second, in terms of like revenue generated from that area, you've trained 3,000. You don't have a figure yet in how much of investment has gone in and how much has come out?
Oh, in
in
terms of the government-specific investment, there's been a huge amount of investment. So, for example, we've spent over ₦1 billion in the purchase of equipment for mechanization. We've spent billions of naira in investment in rice processing equipment. But much more than government investment is the level of private sector investments going into agriculture, which is difficult to quantify. But what we can tell, for example, is that the gap is indeed closing between demand and supply. And in all our value chains, for example, in the rice value chain, the government has invested heavily in rice production and processing. In cassava, the government has invested heavily in cassava production. In fish, the government has invested heavily in fish. But I don't just want to look at the government investment, because at the end of the day, government is an enabler. What is much more important is that the private sector is encouraged, attracted, and we're seeing much more activity in this area.
So give us this picture. So how long does it take? Because people, when they think about getting into agriculture, they always think about, I need to start from land.
Yes.
So how long does it take from seeking to acquire a land to getting it and then moving on?
Well, it all depends, of course, on the size of land. But one of the things that we have realized, as you said, is that the very first step is land. And so we made the process of applying for land and allocating land much easier. So, for example, if you go to the Ogun State website, you'll see all of the forms that are required for application of land. And it can take anything from perhaps a month, but in some cases it may take up to 2 or 3 months. In all cases, it differs. There isn't a hard and fast rule. What is much more important for the investor, whether they're a smallholder farmer or a large investor, is that there is a good symbiotic relationship between the original landowners and the commercial investors. So, for example, when we're talking about commercial investors, we don't just allocate land, we ensure that they're actually able to live equitably and peacefully in their host communities. So there isn't a hard and fast rule. What is much more important, agriculture is a long-term investment. And what's much more important is that you have your investment and you can reap the fruits of your labors for many years to come.
Does that include the time it takes to get the CFO as well?
Not all farmers
need that.
Need CFO, but of course, if you require a CFO, the Bureau of Lands and Survey has also worked assiduously on shortening the time to get the CFO. So Ogun State is looking holistically at the ease of doing business, and we've worked on several of the indicators which we know have been obstacles to investors, and on all of those indicators, there's been significant improvement over the last few years.
So I believe that one of those indicators that you're considering, even while you consider the ease of doing business, is access to credit, which is very key and very important, especially for the farmer. How easy has that been? How have you been able to make that much of an ease of doing business, just so that the farmers are able to have access to credit, and at what rates?
Well, credit always comes up when it comes to agriculture. People are interested in funding. I think the Central Bank of Nigeria and all the development agencies, as I said earlier on, I think the impetus and the support for agriculture has never been stronger. So Ogun State naturally, systematically accesses loans through the Central Bank of Nigeria, Bank of Industry, Bank of Agriculture, NERSA. Much more important is that we make information because information is a key barrier, available to farmers and prospective beneficiaries. And in many cases, we on-lend funds that we have gotten ourselves at single-digit interest rate to some of these beneficiaries. So for example, for our youth programs, we would on-lend the credit that has been received as a subsidized single-digit interest rate to our youth, to our women. We're also ensuring that there's more financial inclusion, because many times people can't access credit because of issues like not having BVN numbers, for example. So when we're looking at access to credit, we're again looking at all of the impediments to accessing credit and helping our farmers ensure that they are more financially included and able to benefit really from the tremendous support that there is for agriculture.
What about the role of microfinance?
We've got to go again, don't worry. We'll have lots of questions that you will take on subsequently. But I know they have a busy schedule here today. We appreciate your coming on this morning. Adebajo is the Commissioner for Agric, and she's been talking to us about this forum, which we'll still explore as we proceed. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.
The government is standing by and ready to offtake all paddy and all rice that is produced in this state. So we want us to approach this farming season with confidence, knowing that the government is ready to support farmers in every regard. In terms of cassava, this administration has already facilitated almost 5,000 hectares of cassava planting through the Ministry of Agriculture and our partners, IFAD, VCDP, and FADAMA. In addition, we are currently clearing 2,000 hectares of land at Owowo for planting this season. We are working in conjunction with the Nigerian Cassava Growers Association, and has already been testified. We have approached both NERSAL and the Central Bank of Nigeria for funding assistance, and these arrangements are very advanced.